The fitness industry is always throwing different metrics at us, saying they're gonna change our life or it's gonna make you so much healthier. So for today, we're gonna break down the metrics that actually matter. They're gonna help with your health, your performance, and also keep you injury-free. One of the most popular trends is hitting 10,000 steps a day. And although this is a great marker, it's not the do-all and end-all of your fitness. For example, in bodybuilding, Jody would always kind of recommend 10,000 steps a day. However, if I'm doing something like cycling or even Stairmaster, obviously my steps are gonna be a lot lower, but it's the movement itself that's a lot more important. So doing 20, 30 minutes of active anything, whether it's pickleball, walking, even like playing with your kids, something like that, is gonna be way more beneficial of a marker than just hitting 10,000 steps a day. Another key thing to note about the 10,000 steps is that it doesn't necessarily mean it's equal amongst all people. For instance, I'm a much smaller person, so me doing 10,000 steps, if I'm not vigorously stepping, my calorie is gonna be a lot lower burn. So a lot of people think 10,000 steps is for a certain caloric burn, but depending on your fitness level, in terms of your body composition, it's gonna be a little bit different. So for example, me versus say Mitch Hooper, we're gonna be very different walking 10,000 steps in our intensity and also just what our body's actually doing and burning. So it's an important thing to note and not a do-all to end all of your fitness. Everyone right now is saying protein cookies, protein ice cream, protein pasta, protein everything. And the huge focus is obviously hitting our protein goal, which is very important, especially if you're someone who's wanting to build more muscle mass. But the other part of the tracking that's really important is also your carbs and your fats, because without proper balance between all three, your actual absorption of your protein will be slightly off. Depending on who you are and where you are in your fitness level, it will obviously vary. A very standard general version is to look at your calories and do 35% protein, 35% carbs, and 30% fat. Now, obviously, as you get more specialized and dialed into your routine, whether you're an endurance athlete, a bodybuilding athlete, or just someone who's trying to live a healthy lifestyle, those will change and they will be a little bit different as you go on. Also, your metabolism changes, so you can eventually eat more and perform at the same level with eating different amounts of food. So for me personally, I do find from bodybuilding, tracking is really important. It's really made me realize what foods actually fuel my body and what makes me feel less inflamed, because also certain foods obviously are harder to digest and makes it more inflamed in your body. So that way you're like more bloated per se, or just like it puts your joints in a more compromised position, so a higher risk of injury. So in terms of performance, food is really important, and I do say tracking is important, but not to the extent of where you're just obsessed with it. I really do think that you can do a good level of tracking without being crazy obsessed and still have a good balance where you can have like a meal out with friends or family and not track that, to give yourself that mental break, which is also really healthy just in terms of like your mind and body. But then also if you're looking for something that's aesthetic, you can track your daily activity. If you're doing something endurance like me, I obviously want to be tracking because I don't want to be burning through my muscle mass, or I don't want to be getting too tired where I don't perform the exact way I'm supposed to perform. So even in bodybuilding, yes, stepping on stage, everything was super tight, very, very small portions, but as soon as it came to performance, all those things increased. So I was really focusing on my carbs more than I was my protein at that point, because I wanted to make sure I had energy to do the things that I needed to do performance-wise. On the internet, a lot of people also share their check-ins in their body, especially in the bodybuilding world. I was also like that as well. Obviously, now that I'm not in bodybuilding, I'm not doing those same check-ins. However, I am still checking in with my coach instead of on a weekly basis, more on like a bi-weekly or even a once-a-month basis, just to kind of keep on top of everything and making sure we have some type of measurement and like oral visual. Whoa. And some type of visual to refer back to, just so we can keep tracking progress. So main things for me being an endurance athlete right now, we want to make sure I'm not losing too much muscle mass, and we're also making sure that overall I'm staying on a little bit of a more athletic structure versus bigger. So not to say that being bigger will really greatly impact your performance. There's a ton of runners, any shapes and sizes, who perform really well. But for me personally, I'm focused on performance, but also a little bit of aesthetics, just because I'm also in the content creator world. I'm not gonna lie, it still matters. So for instance, instead of doing my typical bodybuilding check-in where I'm obviously in heels and bikini and all that stuff, I now instead will check in with Jody and just do like a simple like front pose where you can kind of see my shoulders, my legs, and my waist. Main thing here is that I'm still maintaining muscle mass in my legs, because that's super important. I still have an athletic build on the top, so we haven't completely lost all muscle mass in the top area, and then we're keeping this area a little bit smaller. Waist area for me, I like to focus on keeping a little bit smaller because it's also just a great indicator of like your actual health going on inside, which we'll talk about a little bit later as a good indicator, like your visceral fat inside of you. The fatter you are here, or the more mass that you carry here, you just have more likelihood of potential health risks that you want to be just aware of. So I like to be, because I'm not in bodybuilding, I like to just spend a little more time paying attention to full body health and inside health. So it'll be a front pose, a side pose. So again, you can kind of see like how much of a waist I have or don't have. And then honestly, I ignore the back pose because no one looks good from the back without posing because it's just a weird friggin' angle. So that's mainly what I do for check-ins. I would say if you don't feel comfortable sharing them online, you don't have to. I personally don't do that really right now, but I do keep it in a folder for myself to just kind of flip through and keep consistent and something to look through in case I start to see muscle mass going down, because also something that's super important as a metric is the amount of muscle mass you have. It directly correlates your ability to avoid injuries in the future because your body's properly supported by your muscles that you have. In addition to pictures, I do also still like to weigh myself. I usually weigh myself once a week in the morning, same time across the board, just so it stays consistent. And I don't just use a regular body weight scale because there's just so many other metrics that we need to pay attention to in order to actually be healthy, focus on performance and also injury. So I use the Renpo body composition scale, and this is great because it has an app. So in terms of actual knowledge, you can just get it right away. You don't have to drive somewhere and do a test and then wait for the results. So on here alone, I can see like my fat percentage, my muscle mass percentage. BMI is a metric on here. However, that is one of the ones we actually don't really care to take attention to because it doesn't take into consideration your muscle mass as well as your skeletal system. So it's like your bones. Things we want to pay attention to that actually matter is one, our overall weight, but within that, we can break it down even further to our body fat mass, our muscle mass, our visceral fat. So that's anything that's inside that's actually covering your organs. So that's where health really comes into play. If you have a lot of fat covering those areas, you're higher at risk for health issues. In terms of scales and metrics, I really do think this is one of the best that's out there, and you guys can get this actually on Prime Day because they are having a sale. The information is really easy to view, and it's also easy to stay consistent so that way you're properly tracking everything and paying attention to the important metrics and not just a number on the scale. One of the most important indicators of your health actually is your VO2 max test. So knowing your VO2 is really important, and then how you do that, you actually go do a test. So you guys saw in one of my last videos, I did that. That's a huge thing because in order to increase my VO2 max and make sure I stay healthy, I always train in specific time zones. So my treadmill will break it down by my pace, as well as I have my watch to track my heart rate. And my heart rate is basically how I'm gonna be training and elevating my VO2 max. And so if you're someone who doesn't currently do that and you're in endurance sports, it's super important. And if you're just someone in general who's never actually done a VO2, but wanna know how healthy you are and kind of a good predictor of what your health will be like, a VO2 max is a really good measurement to actually consider and do for yourself. So the best way to increase your VO2 max score, it's not gonna happen overnight. It's gonna be something that happens over series of training, weeks, months, etc. So for me right now, I'm focusing on zone 2 to 3. So those are long runs where I'm spending at least 45 minutes plus in these zones. So that's heart rate of 115 to max 141, so that's zone 2, 3. And then you wanna spend a small portion of time still doing interval training where your heart rate's really spiking. And that's for me anywhere like 155 plus for me, for my zone 5. So that is more quick workouts, like 20, 25 minutes, and really only once or twice a week versus the long runs and staying in your zone 2, 3 or multiple times a week. So that's the best way to increase that score, and the higher your score, the better predictor of your longevity and your health in general. And if you get an emotional support animal, it's even the best. This is also a metric that everyone should have. Or if you're allergic to dogs, a fish. Now that we're in the gym, there's tons of things that people pay attention to in terms of measuring and metric. First one is obviously gonna be our weights. Now for bodybuilding, I was following a specific program and making sure to increase my weights each week. Now for me personally, I don't write it down, I just tend to remember it. But if you are someone who needs pen to paper, or even just texting it to yourself in your phone, just as a note, that's also really important and can ensure progressive overload. And usually I would say increasing your weight every 1 to 2 weeks is kind of what you wanna see. Now strength training isn't the only thing you need to pay attention to in the gym. Yes, it's important, but you also wanna be measuring your flexibility, because a lot of people ignore the mobility flexibility side, and that's the biggest way to avoid injury. You can be lifting all the weight in the world, but if you're not properly stretching, recovering, cooling down, warming up, all those good things, then you won't actually have full range of motion and you're at more risk of muscular imbalances and also injury. Now as a female, one thing to pay attention to that males don't have to worry about is obviously our cycle. There's certain times of the month where we're gonna feel a little bit weaker or also more energized. And so that's when lifts can feel a lot better, you're lifting more weight, or opposite, you feel less and you're lifting way less weight. So just pay attention to that and track that with your workout, so that way you're not getting frustrated or you're not getting annoyed at yourself like, why do I feel so weak today? There's always a reason for that, especially when it comes to the cycle. Something to keep into consideration, especially being a female and not a male in the bodybuilding space or just the gym space in general. I think one thing that gets bagged on a lot is just resistance training in general. So something like Pilates, where obviously you're not lifting weights or you're not doing something super heavy, but you're still improving your overall strength. So it's body weight stuff or it's slight resistance, but for someone who's say 60 plus, A performance class is gonna be perfect for them in building structure and muscle mass and maintaining versus someone who's like a little bit younger. They can incorporate both. I like to personally do Pilates once a week because again, it works certain ranges of motion that I just don't hit in my strength training. So there's no reason to dislike or like certain styles of training. Everyone should just try and see what they like and then fit into the schedule as they see. Going through all the metrics today, the most important ones I definitely would say is just activity in general instead of say goal for 10K steps, just moving around, being active. In terms of your food, making sure that you're on track for what you need to be eating and just taking a good healthy approach will be able to get you to your goals. You don't have to be over measuring anything or being over obsessive, just something that's very healthy and well-rounded. And again, carbs are not evil. You can definitely track your protein, but also track your carbs and your fats as it's super important. Then also for our lifting, we wanna make sure that we're taking in account for females at least our hormones and where we are in our cycle in terms of our lifting, and we're also tracking our progress and not only focusing on just strength, but in fitness everywhere. So in terms of our mobility, our flexibility, also taking time to rest and recover, having time to sleep and actually rest our muscles because that's when a lot of the strength actually gets built in those moments. And then lastly, how you actually measure yourself. So whether it's pictures, whether it's a body composition scale or anything like that, there's more than just a number on the scale. There's so much that makes up who we are as a person and that end number. It's not just one number tells all. You obviously have your skeletal system, your muscle, your fat, your organs, all that stuff that goes into account. So having something a little bit more detailed is definitely gonna help you. So keep it relatively simple, but just make sure you're actually measuring the right things in order to be properly fueling yourself for your lifestyle, for health, for performance, and also to be injury-free.